All right. All right. Hopefully everybody's got can see the agenda. Would somebody care to make for item 1? Don't everybody speak at once. John or Steve?
John, I move to certify that it has been determined by this committee that the nature of the declared COVID-19 emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the committee to assemble in a single location, and further, that the agenda items to be taken up at this meeting are necessary to continue operations and discharge lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the committee. And therefore, the committee agrees to a decentralized electronic meeting.
Steve Lucas will second that motion.
All right. Do we need poll votes on these, Amy?
I'm afraid so. Would you like me to call it?
Please.
Mr. Easter,
Aye.
Mr. Lucas,
You hear me? Aye.
Mr. Meeks.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody. Amy also sent out the financial reports for this month. Anything you want to point out, Amy?
We did end the year with an operating surplus of $169,692. A good portion of that is budgeted as carry forward into FY21 for staff expenses. Were there any questions in reviewing the statements?
John had none.
Steve had none. Make the motion. We accept the report.
Second.
Any discussion?
None for me.
Okay. Mr. Easter?
No further discussion.
I'm sorry, for the vote. Are you ready for the vote?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Easter,
Aye.
Mr. Lucas,
Aye.
Mr. Meeks.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, I assume this is the next thing on the agenda, since I don't see the agenda anymore.
Correct. This
right.
is a list
I just-
of dedicated reserve allocations. The balance up top is the carrying balance in all of the savings and investment accounts as of June 30th. And then the split here is along the same lines as the categories used last year as a starting point.
How do the amounts differ?
Let me pull up last year's.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to pull up last year's.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure I can show both at the same time. Sorry about that. The reserve balance at the end of June of 2019 was $221,740. The changes between these two lists are the payroll reserve amount has increased to because the payroll amounts now 3 months worth is more than 3 months of payroll was last year. Last year was on here at 120,000. The dam maintenance funds balance has increased from $52,058.72 up to the 76,000 shown on the new list. DCR gives the $26,000 a year in funding towards dam maintenance expenditures, and we do not routinely expend all of that money on the general mowing and maintenance. So there's a significant reserve for if any large maintenance items were to come up in the future. The other major change between the two lists are the addition of the FY20 TA reserve balance. Much of the TA funding received last year due to the large cost share allocation has been carried forward into this year to pay for staff costs, but the expected balance remaining at the end of FY21 is $76,000 that could go towards the next year's operating, technical assistance expenditures if needed.
I think that's a very wise decision to put that in reserve because fiscal year 22 is going to be, I expect fiscal year 22 to be very painful for all of us.
And then the other change between, the FY20 list, I do wish I'd put it up where you could see them both at the same time. I apologize. Last year we had moving costs and furniture expenses on here in the amount of $7,000. We've moved, that's done. And then there was a line for staff incentive funds. There's been a reserve placed into the operating budget as drafted for potential incentives in the spring. So that's come off the reserve list. It's built into the operating budget if the board were to choose to allocate those funds for that purpose next spring. So that extra funding has been pulled into the vehicle replacement line instead. That was not on the list last year. But with the Dodge being sold, there is a potential need for an additional vehicle that is a little more roadworthy and safe. We do not have any pricing or budget or ideas for a new vehicle yet, but that was just the placeholder figure for the balance not used in the other line items.
All right. Any questions, John or Steve?
Yeah, Amy, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, you go ahead. I was going to make the motion to approve, so you go ahead.
Okay. Now, I was just curious, looking at those last three line items, Amy, it looks like we've got 5,000, 30,000, and 4,000 all for vehicle upgrade, replacement, and repair. Is that correct?
The upgrade and replace equipment line was intended for computers and office equipment.
Okay.
Yes, units.
As it
anything
says
like
there.
that.
And how realistic is that?
We are in pretty good stead right now for computers. We expect that one laptop might need to be replaced in the next year, but other than that, everybody is pretty well equipped right now. But it's nice to have the funds put away if that need arises in future, especially in a
Sure.
more restricted budget year.
Yeah, I agree. And it is true that we still have flexibility with, say, those last three categories if we don't have that kind of need for vehicle repair or replacement, that we can move within those three categories, correct?
Yes. And placing any of these items on this list does not authorize expending the funds. We would
Right.
have to come back to the board to actually get approval to spend the fund. This is just setting out a list of reserves, because if we have too much unallocated cash in the bank, it doesn't.
It becomes an audit
stop
issue.
procedure.
It doesn't look good.
You don't need the
Understand.
money if you got all that. So if you dedicate it to
Exactly.
a source, then you.
Yeah, I thought I remembered most of that from the previous year's drills. So with that, no, I have no further questions. Steve, you want to go ahead with the motion?
Sure, they call it a slush fund, and I make a motion that we accept the dedicated reserves as presented.
Second.
Okay. Amy, you want to call the roll?
Okay. Mr. Easter,
Aye.
Mr. Lucas,
Aye.
Mr. Meeks.
Aye.
On the desktop procedures item, we have sent out the summary of updates provided by DCR, as well as the full document. It's a pretty lengthy list of updates, but most of them are still the same procedures as we were already operating under. There are some more specifics about having the treasurer examine all of the credit card receipts rather than just the reconciliation when paying the credit card bill. Very strict instructions about sales tax exemption. Every vendor that we purchase from more than 3 times in a year, or a purchase of $100 or greater, we have to apply for the sales tax exemption, which does make it a little tricky sometimes if you're doing shopping in local stores. But any type of vendor that we order from, by check payment, it's very easy to deal with the sales tax exemption on invoice payments. But just getting everybody in the habit of, if you run up to Kroger or somewhere like that locally, to make sure they go through the customer service and do the sales tax exemption.
Yeah, and Amy, if you don't mind if I jump in, I just want to alert everyone, the challenges with that, of course, are if we are at Kroger or another store for maybe our own shopping needs, and we see that there are 2 bottles of Clorox wipes on the shelf, my tendency would be to grab them, because we know that if we do not have proper cleaning supplies in our office to last us, a few months here, and we end up with a shortage, then I'm not able to provide a clean work environment in our office. Amy and I are looking into finding supplies from other sources than local stores. But if you were to go to any of our vendors online that we typically work with, where the exemption is already built in, like Amazon or Staples, those supplies are not available. And so, it's a challenge if you're in a store and it's crowded and you've got your mask on and you're trying to get in and out as quickly as you can, to try to then go to the customer service desk and explain that you have a tax exempt status, and to try to prove it. For a bottle of Clorox wipes, there's a trade-off there. So that's been a bit of a challenge. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong. How, if we're getting reimbursed, maybe I'm a little bit unclear, but this would be just good for all of us to know. If I were to purchase something with my own money and then get reimbursed, then do I just not get reimbursed on the tax, or is that allowable? Maybe I'm confused on that part of it.
If the district purchases directly, then it's tax exempt. If you purchase individually, you can't use the tax exemption for that. So I assume that your reimbursement should include the sales tax, but we would be discouraged from making purchases under a reimbursement basis because of that.
Okay, so ideally we would in advance know that, or if Kroger has supplies, then we would be more encouraged to go through the customer service line and separate out our personal items, and then, grab that bottle of Clorox and go through the process of the tax exemption and use the district credit card for that purchase.
Right. You would
Yeah.
have to use the district card or pay by check to make
Okay.
it exempt.
Just so you all know, my father has been gracious enough to stock up on supplies for us. I know Stephen already knows this because he's seen my reimbursement requests. But my father found a stash of some things down in Lynchburg at, I think, the Walmart and the CVS. And so I did him to grab as much as he could for us, and he did. He went back like every day for like a week or two, stocking up for us. So I think we will be okay for maybe another 3 months, maybe 6 months. But you know, depending on how things go and supplies last, the last thing I want is our office or our vehicles or our staff to run out of those essential supplies like hand sanitizer and wipes for the office, because we're cleaning far more regularly than we ever used to. So you can imagine if someone's wiping on the way in, cleaning on, you know, wiping light switches and the alarm code on the door and the handles and the refrigerator door and the sink faucets, you know, we're definitely going through those supplies far more frequently than we used to. Anyway, so I just wanted you guys to let you know, I think that's really the only area where we should have a challenge. For the most part, I think everything else we can purchase on Amazon or Staples, and we already have those accounts set up to do tax exempt. So I just wanted you to know that.
Hey, Debbie, how are other districts dealing with the situation?
They're going to their vendors that they use the most, and they are getting a tax card. Hadn't been a lot of discussion about it yet, but if you were to purchase it, you pay tax and you'd be reimbursed for it. If the district purchases it, the district is not supposed to pay sales tax. So that's just kind of the way that it is. And evidently there must be a way to receive a card. I think John Marshall is working on receiving this this card that they can use with vendors, but you can't just go to the Walmart and expect the cashier to understand what you're doing. So you kind of have to work with corporate, and that takes a while. So what I think most districts are doing is they're identifying the businesses that they use the most and go ahead and get the tax exempt status with those businesses. Like Ann was just saying, you've done that with Amazon and Staples.
Right, and I think we have one for Walmart as well. But for instance, the stores in Charlottesville have been sold out completely. Every time I go to Kroger, and I don't typically go to the Walmart in Charlottesville, but the Kroger is out of supplies 100%. It just so happened that Lynchburg had a fair amount, and so my dad had texted me and said, "Do you want us to grab some?" But when I've tried to shop for those things in Charlottesville, I have not had any luck finding. Clorox wipes and Lysol certainly have been, you know, and then the hand sanitizer that I'm finding now, I am finding more in Lynchburg, but not finding it very frequently. But I also, you know, just from a time perspective, you know, it's a challenge because we don't really have time to go, you know, shopping every single day, trying to find a store that's going to have something. So anyway, I think we've done a pretty good job right now to hopefully get us for the next several months. And then Amy and I were going to look into possibly finding some products that we could buy from government kind of bulk, you know, purchases instead of having to rely on local stores. Greg from Culpeper told me that he's going to Walmart and finding isopropyl alcohol and stocking up on that. And he says he just goes in like once a week, but I went and they didn't have any. So he told me not to compete with him either. But so anyway, I think we're doing the best we can. I just wanted you guys to know that really that's really been the only area where I feel like we've had a challenge. I think staff is now understands more clearly that we need to try to purchase through the vendors we already have a tax exempt status with. We probably will get called on that in our audit. So just so you all know, we're expecting that to possibly be something we get called out on in our audit.
The other topic in here, segregation of duties. That's pretty difficult right now to bring more people into the process when we are so limited on how many staff members can be in the office at the same time. Once we go back to more normal operating procedures, I would like to discuss ways that we can involve other staff members in the bookkeeping process to address some of the segregation of duties issues.
Amy, to be clear, what you're indicating is, and I, just to make it maybe a little more clear, is that Amy has check signing authority. And I believe Amy would prefer to not have check signing authority because she's the one that's actually creating the checks. Is that
Correct. That's one
part of it?
That's one of the topics. Yes.
Okay. So right now, Lisa, I believe Lisa, Luke, and I still all have check signing authority from a staff level. So it would be more of making sure that we have one of those two staff, but then the other signature is a director, and that's usually Stephen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So were there other topics that?
So yes, either somebody else takes the blank checks if I stay as a check signer, or else I come off as a check signer so that I can keep the storage of the blank checks, items like that.
Okay.
And you require two
Anything else you
signatures
want
on your
clarity?
check.
Yes, we do require 2 signatures on all checks, regardless of the amount.
And do you require that one of those signatures must be a director, or can it be
Yes.
2 staff? Okay.
We used to permit 2 staff. The budget committee decided earlier this year that they wanted the 1 director to sign every check.
Yeah.
So Debbie, that's why Stephen is signing, Stephen Meeks is now a check, he's the treasurer, so he's signing the checks. And then I believe Steve Lucas is a backup, and John Easter, of course, are backups if Stephen Meeks is not available.
Right. I think that helps you with that segregation of duties that you were talking about. But I totally agree with what you're saying, Amy, that if you're doing all the preparations, you should not be signing them. And I think that's what the auditors would tell you.
I didn't have anything else on this topic unless you guys have questions.
No questions from John.
Yeah, Amy, I think the other one to point out is the reimbursement for expenditures need to be within 30 days. I believe that's a new one also. Oh, you were just on, I saw it down below. Right, page 23, it says. Maybe there's some other areas as well, but if I recall, I know that there's also, we have historically not held anyone to a 30-day or any timeline that I know of. And I don't know that it'll be as big of a deal since we probably aren't traveling to Graves Mountain or to other, we may not be traveling, or directors may not be traveling as much as they used to. But I know historically we've had a challenge, and probably even with staff, but I certainly know that we have not made it clear that this 30-day reimbursement needs to happen.
Now, what some districts are opting to do is to actually have like a travel voucher made out for each director at the board meeting. I realize we're in different times right now. So that each month when they come into a board meeting, they would bring whatever receipts or whatever and actually fill out the form and then leave it with the administrative staff to reimburse them. So I don't know if that's something you might want to start doing once we get back to whatever's normal. But the actual receipts, original receipts, is also an issue because you have to have the original receipts. This auditing firm seems to be very concerned about original receipts too.
Versus a copy.
Correct.
So if you come out of a hotel, somehow we got to make sure that, I guess, whatever's considered the original.
Well, I think what was happening is that they were scanning receipts in and the district office was never really getting the receipt. And that seemed to be a problem.
Okay. So then we may need people to mail us their receipts because we're not meeting in person, or they can drop them off certainly at the office when we're there. But it's that timeline, 30 days, I think was, so yeah.
And the original
we
receipt
have-
issue, I'm sorry, the original receipt issue is a change a little bit for credit card receipts as well, because the staff clearly in the Louisa office will just scan their receipts in rather than mail the originals. So now we've made arrangements that he will bring them or mail them.
And obviously, when your auditor comes this fall, you can have a discussion with them about, you know, your own individual situation there at Thomas Jefferson, and they might be able to give you some advice on how they recommend you.
All right. Well,
Okay.
those are some changes that have, yeah, thank you, Amy and Debbie, for jumping in on that. I wanted to make sure that we didn't gloss this over too much, because there are some changes that will make things more complicated and take more time. And that's all. It's more time. Not questioning the rationale, but just acknowledging that these kinds of things add up to taking more time on our workload. Thanks.
Okay. And Steve, I think you wanted to talk about electronic payments.
Yeah, just really briefly, I'm working, I've been trying to figure out some way to free up Amy and the staff from writing all these checks. And I know that the state DCR discourages electronic payments. So I'm moving slowly. Came up with some ideas, what Jamie looked at and said, well, that doesn't work. When they send out the check, they send out a letter with it. And it doesn't make any sense to do a check electronically and then send out the paper, then send out a letter after that for to follow up on that. So it's something I'm working on, and we'll continue to do so and run it by Amy and Anna each time and let them tear it up and go back to the drawing board. So I think it is, just something that I think we can work towards. I look at the uncleared checks, and there's a lot of checks out there, and I realize that a lot of them were written just before the report went out, so it's skewed a little bit, skewed a lot. But notice that when our own directors are not clearing their checks, I think it's an issue and something that just needs to be looked at. So it's an ongoing process right now.
Okay.
I do think setting up the electronic check process for that many different individuals might take more time than writing the check. Like if you wanted to do an electronic deposit to someone's bank account, because you work with if you're talking about cost share checks, I would be surprised that could be more efficient than just writing the check, honestly.
Well, I think it's something I'm finding out that the expense may well be abandoned because the expense may wind up being more than the savings that we would realize by time. So it's I'll be making some calls. Go ahead.
Oh, I'd say it'd be good to find out like what you find out.
Yeah, I think it's changed over the years. You look back at some things were written back in the in 2013, and they've changed completely now in 2020. So I think the industry is responding, and there's some competition out there to try to keep things more economical, that kind of thing. So next month, if we'll see how things go. But you know, we're not rushing into this, not asking for wholesale changes, just to get an idea to make this save us some money and make it more efficient.
Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but so for some vendors, we already pay by credit card. Is that correct? Like some of our software or like Zoom accounts and things like that, we already pay those by credit card. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so in some ways, I guess we already are making electronic payments, if you will, because we can use a credit card. And then obviously now Stephen is looking at the details of each credit card, not just signing the reconciliation. So there's oversight there. Amy, I don't want to make any more work for you. Would there be any merit in having, let's say, a repeat customers, if you will, including board members and staff, say 4 reimbursements? Because then it would just be a one-time setup. And I assume we already have the setup staff since our paychecks are already done electronically. Would there be any benefit at all into having that done? Could we use that process for staff now instead of you physically writing a reimbursement check for me and then me going to the bank and depositing it? I'm just wondering, and I don't want to make any more work for you. If you say no, I'm not offended. I just am curious.
I do have the ability to add staff reimbursements to their direct deposit. However, because of the need for signatures on the paper reimbursement request, I don't know that it really cuts down on processing. It does cut down on the tediousness of staff members having to go cash the physical check. For reimbursements to directors, that wouldn't really work through QuickBooks as it's set up now, because the built-in payment function in there is only for independent contractors. So you wouldn't want to get a 1099 for your reimbursement as for your director expenses.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you.
Hey, guys, I have a medical appointment. It's so good to talk with everybody, but I'm going to have to jump off. Have a good weekend.
All right.
Stay safe, Debbie.
You saying that? Hey, Ann. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh.
I'm here. I'm here.
Got one question. Guys, I guess you might have seen the email that we got this NACD NRCS grant. Who is providing the matching funds for that grant?
We are, through the fact that our staff is already being paid for much of the same work. So it's in kind, it's not cash.
Oh, it's in kind. Okay.
Yes. They said it's really rare that anybody would ever actually have cash match. It's usually done in the form of in-kind match. So if our staff person goes out with NRCS on a 2-hour site visit, then an hour of that time is match, or whatever the percentage. I think it's 80, I can't remember, but I want to say it's 80-20%. Then 80% of their time would be directly reimbursable and 20% of the time would be match.
Is this our employee or NRCS?
It's our
employee?
It's our employee. It would only be our employee. NAC, I'm fairly sure that NRCS cannot count as match because that would be double dipping. But it's our staff, and any other people we bring into the mix could count towards match. But it's primarily, so it would be 2% of our staff time. We're already paying our staff 100%. And then we'd be getting reimbursed 80% by NACD to help NRCS more than we traditionally do.
Okay,
So it's in kind. And
Okay.
yeah, and so our staff is paid primarily by DCR for the ag team, that is. Although Audrey, for instance, is paid 100% by Albemarle County. So it's a combination of locality funding as well as state funding that would be where it would be how staff is being paid, and then 20% of their time would be counted as in kind.
okay.
And Audrey, I believe we have 100.
Well, just a lot different.
Go ahead.
I said we're just a lot different than every other state that has applied for this, so.
You mean because they're using cash as in kind, or they don't have match, or they don't have?
Well, in most cases, the only district staff is NRCS.
Oh, right. Yeah, good point. So in the case of Audrey, for instance, we have 168 hours, I think, built into the budget for her. And, you know, her time on that would, you know, depending on when she's working on those hours, whether it's before her contract ends with the county or after, then, you know, her time would count as match coming from locality funding. And if it's the other ag team, then it would be state funding. But we're already paying for them. So we've already built our budget for the year without this funding. So then our budget is going to change, of course, because we're going to now have new revenue coming in that we had not, because when we approved the budget, we weren't sure whether we were going to get the grant award or not. Now that we've received it, we will end up with additional revenue that we had not anticipated. But that's not a bad thing.
Okay.
And Stephen, we're lucky in that regard. And I know in California, I did not have the in-kind match. So it would have been very difficult. You'd have to get another grant in order to match this grant. You have to piggyback so many grants. It's just, and the rules are difficult on what you can piggyback and what you can't piggyback. We're very, very fortunate to have the state funding and to have the locality funding.
Right. Okay. All right. Any other questions, guys? John, Steve? Any other issues?
No questions from John.
None from Steve.
Anything else, Amy?
No, thank you.
Steve Lucas moves the meeting be adjourned.
Second.
You need to do a poll on that, Amy?
I guess so. Mr. Lucas,
Aye.
Mr. Meeks,
Aye.
Mr. Easter,
All right.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right. See y'all
Good
next
meeting.
week.
Thanks very much.
Thank you,
All right.
John.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.